tells me we're going live, but we're not quite there. We are now officially live, so I will drop off.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to Lewiston School Committee Budget Workshop. I'm calling this meeting to order. It is 5:06 p.m. on April 22nd, 2020. And we will start our meeting out with a quick COVID-19 update from Superintendent Finn.
So with an emphasis on quick, I picked up on that. Not a whole lot has changed since we did this less than 48 hours ago. I would like to just point out that most of the work in the past couple of days has taken place in operations. Dave Terrio, who actually started this this video this evening, is making laptops a lot easier to use, making icons very user-friendly for parents, even for our English language learners to be able to access when they come back off spring break next week. Our child nutrition office is still up and serving over the break. I'll say this, I'm very, very proud of the work that Chief Administrative Officer and our CFO, Bobby Avery, has worked on in the last couple of days, tirelessly to maximize the use of the CARES Act in partnership with Teaching and Learning, as well as her Office of Finance, to develop a plan for the school committee's consideration this evening that would allow for a continuance of our journey towards world-class education. We'll remember that no matter what is thrown in front of us, we're just not going to stop on that direction of a world-class education for all learners. We take no days off when it comes to that. And so Bobby has been a warrior for that, while being mindful and responsible partners with the city of Lewiston. Mr. Barrett and I have had several meetings and several conversations to help deliver us to where we are this evening. We know that we're in this together, but we also know that we're going to prevail together when all said and done. And I am very excited about tonight's workshop and very pleased with what I've seen so far in the partnership.
Great. Thank you, sir. Okay, agenda item number 3 is to receive a presentation by City of Lewiston Mayor Mark Kayer and City Administrator Ed Barrett.
So thank you very much. I think Ed will, I think hopefully you folks got a memo that Ed copied over to you folks. So I'm going to let Ed talk about that. I guess, you know, I was hoping that we could be part of this meeting tonight. One, you know, to be somewhat of a sounding board and hear some thoughts from committee members. We recognize that we're asking a lot from the school department, and I have to just, I want to reiterate with what Superintendent Finn said. We've had just a great working relationship between Heather Hunter and Bobby Avery, Ed Barrett and Superintendent Finn, and I know the chair and I have spoken several times through this process. We are asking a lot from the school department this year. We expect significant revenue shortages from revenue sharing to excise tax, and the list goes on. And we just think now is not the time to pass on any tax increase to the residents and property owners of Lewiston. And that's why I think you'll find some, you know, some passion in myself and the city council, because we're hearing from our constituents every day how tough it is for them right now. Many of them are unemployed. Many of them are trying to get rent assistance, so many other variables that are coming into play. And I just think we owe it to our community at this point. And I do know Heather and Bobby have been talking, and that Bobby may have some presentation that I think would be helpful to the city without putting the school department in jeopardy. So at this point, I'll just turn it over to Ed so he can share some of his thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark, and appreciate very much having the opportunity to be here, at least by voice tonight. Sorry about my camera not working for some reason. Going back a little historically, I think the school superintendent's initial budget and the city's budget were asking for a similar sized increase. The city was looking at a 4.5% increase in its operating budget, and the schools were looking at 5.7, 5.8%. So we started with a city tax rate increase of 85 cents and an 86-cent school increase. When the school committee started looking at the budget, you folks very quickly made some adjustments and reduced the operating budget, school operating budget, by a little over $1.4 million, which really helped a lot in bringing things down. That got the school department down to, I think it was 15-cent increase. We had our first real discussion with the city council earlier this week, or actually earlier last week, about the city side of the budget. And at that point, the city council made it clear that they were looking for no tax increase at all on the city side. Initially, that would have called for a reduction on our side of $1.5 million or so, but we also had to go back and revise all of our revenues. We went back and looked at what happened in the last recession, and over a 3-year period, our non-property tax revenues fell somewhere around 13 to 15%. We then looked at all of our revenues on the city side and made adjustments in them, trying to recognize that the best example we had of the kind of impact we're looking at was in the Great Recession. That was actually spread over a 3-year period. We seem to be seeing it all within a 3-month period now. So we went back and had to reduce our revenues by 1.6 million. So for the city side to get down to zero was going to require somewhere around a $3.5 million reduction in our expenditure budget. And that's on basically a $37 million budget. So you're talking close to 8, 9, 10%. One of the things we did, and it kind of rubs against both the way Heather and I look at municipal finance, is we recognize that we could not accept that kind of a reduction on the expenditure side only without doing some dramatic damage to our ability to provide municipal services from police, public works, and other departments. So we generally have a policy that we won't use fund balance except for one-time expenditures, for capital or one-time expenditures. We've stuck to that policy pretty rigorously since the Great Recession. But in this instance, we're asking the city council to make an exception and allow us to use $1.6 million roughly in fund balance toward the coming year's budget, recognizing that this is a unique emergency financial situation. That still left us with the need, or leaves us with the need, to make significant reductions on our side of the budget. And we presented a number of scenarios to the council earlier last Thursday to talk about trying to find somewhere around $1.6 to $1.7 million in reductions. We've done that through a number of things. We've gone through and basically eliminated a lot of almost all capital. We have looked at our operating budget. I think Heather has made over 300 or 500 line item adjustments and reductions in our budget. We've tried to find everything we can to try to cut back as much as possible on our expenditure side. To get on our side to zero would require that we eliminate 18 positions out of a workforce of about 340, including 6 positions that are occupied. My recommendation to the council was to take all of the reductions that we had proposed, but to leave about $280,000 in the budget that would allow us to not have to lay off any employees in this environment. So to that point, then that would leave us with, I think it was a roughly 16-cent increase on the city side. The council said no, they don't want to do that. They want it to be zero. So right at the moment, we're looking at eliminating 12 vacant positions and laying off 6 positions, most of which we have not yet identified in terms of which positions it would be, but certainly that would be painful. It takes me back to the days of 2011 when we had to do something similar. So as I said, the council is looking to get to zero. Any help that you folks could give us would be very much appreciated in at least trying to not have to lay people off on our side of the budget. I'll also mention very quickly that this is still obviously a budget that's being worked on in detail. So there may be some other minor adjustments required. We did, for example, have to add money back into the budget for general assistance, anticipating a greater demand there. We also may have to make other adjustments as we get closer to adopting the budget that could go one way or the other. I don't know yet at all. But that's kind of the situation as I see it. The council is pretty firmly committed to getting to zero. So any help from anybody would be appreciated in that.
Madam Chair, if I could just add one more thing real quick. We're not, at this point, there's no CARE money for any municipalities. So we definitely are reaching out to our federal delegation, trying to encourage some of that, because truly, if we could just get enough to cover our revenue shortage, we wouldn't even have to come to the school committee like this and ask for these significant reductions. And it's my understanding that the school is getting a significant CARE Act package. So that's, I just wanted to make sure I shared that we're not able to do that at this point.
Yeah, one of the things, one final thing is that with what we're talking about here, the city side of the budget would basically be flat from last year with no change, no increase at all. So I think even with what the school department's talking about, there is still some increase on the school side that would be in the budget. Plus, as was mentioned, any CARE funding that's coming to the city has to be spent directly for COVID-related expenses. Cannot even reimburse us for personnel expenses that are already budgeted that are being devoted to COVID issues. So unless it's money out of our pockets for supplies or stuff like that, we will not be reimbursed for those expenditures. And we're not getting any general budget support from the federal government.
Could I ask a question regarding that? And just to clarify for the public, the article in the paper this morning talking about money to help with general assistance and things of that nature from the CARES Act. Can you just talk about, again, how exactly that money has to be used? I don't think, can you just reiterate what that's about so people aren't confused?
We're getting about $580,000 in additional community development block grant funding that has to be used to address COVID-related issues affecting low and moderate income residents of the community. So basically, we are looking at using that money to do a number of things. One is that we are looking to use it to provide people with housing assistance, both either in terms of rent or mortgages, if they are in a situation where they were negatively affected by the COVID situation. They lost their jobs, they lost income. We are looking at providing grants and economic support to small and relatively small businesses, very small and small businesses, to help them get through the cash flow issues that they're going to be facing, plus to potentially help them do a little bit of renovations to their facilities if they need to assist in distancing efforts. So, if they need shields in front of serving locations or things like that. And then we have the potential to provide a little bit of funding to some social service agencies if they request it, and if they're being hit with additional costs associated with responding to this situation. We've already done some of that to Trinity Jubilee Center, but we cannot use that money to displace or replace ongoing municipal expenditures that aren't related to the COVID response.
Excellent, thank you very much. So I think what I would like to do is to open up the floor for committee members to ask any questions they may have of Mr. Barrett or Mr. Kayer. And I'm just going to go in order. So I would start, since Ms. Parks is not here, I would start with Mr. Damon. Do you have any questions?
No, not really. I understand the revenue reduction is purely an estimate. Without having actually studied the city side budget, I've studied ours, but I haven't really studied the city side budget. So I really, at this point, something may come up, but not right now.
Okay. Mr. Majerus Collins?
So I have a couple of questions, and I guess I'll just start with one. Is that good, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Okay, all right. My excuses for putting my hand in front of my mouth like this. I guess my first question is I understand the sentiment behind the desire of some folks to see an across the board no tax increase. What I'm wondering is whether the city has explored options to try to shift the property tax burden in a way that focuses on the people who are adversely impacted by this and the businesses that are adversely impacted by this, and rather than just talking about an across the board no increase. So I guess that's my first question: is what kind of creative options has the city looked into in that respect?
Well, there's basically not a whole lot that we can do that would be targeted. For example, we can't forgive property taxes or reduce property taxes on one party without doing a similar across the board impact on everyone. The state requires equal and proportionate taxation, so that's not something we can do. Most of the city's revenue comes from property taxes. That's one major source, and from state revenue sharing. That comes from the state. That revenue source we think is going to be dramatically impacted by the economic downturn, since it's so heavily dependent on income and property taxes. The only other thing we could look at again is fees and service charges. But again, we don't have the flexibility under state law to pick and choose who gets a break and who doesn't get a break. It has to be across the board effect on everyone. So we can't look at your income and say, okay, we're going to charge you less for your water than we're going to charge your neighbor who's got a higher income. We just can't do that.
And then-
So
let me just add, because I think Ed said, revenue sharing is tied to sales tax. So
And income.
and income.
Sales and income taxes,
Okay.
5% of state sales and income taxes.
Right. And so we expect that, and I'm sure everybody can see it. I mean, sales tax is going to be dramatically reduced just because of the purchasing power that's been lost from people staying home.
And their incomes that have been affected by the current unemployment rate, which, people are saying is going to hit or exceed 20% possibly.
And so we did get that $500,000 CDBG money, and we immediately focused on trying to assist community members survive the impacts that they're facing. So you bring up a good point about shifting whatever we can to assist community members. We're definitely doing that. Today a homeless shelter, temporary shelter, wellness shelter opened up. So, we are paying attention to the needs of the community, but we do have limits on how we can shift our funding.
So as an example, my understanding is, and I'm just spent the last few days trying to learn as much as I can about this. So I'm pretty new at it. But my understanding is that there are some municipalities in Maine that, for example, provide a property tax rebate for seniors. I don't know if Lewiston does that. And I would be sort of curious to know what other kinds of categories of people might be able to qualify for that sort of thing if the city did want to do that. Because again, I think that while there are a lot of folks in our community who are being hurt by this, and everybody is hurting in some way, even if they're not hurting financially, there are also some people who are being hurt far worse than others, and some businesses that are being hurt far worse than others. And so just to my mind, trying to be as creative as possible with those things is really a priority.
Again, just to follow up on what the mayor said, the funding we get for community development block grant funds must be used to assist low and moderate income individuals. So even if we're assisting a business, we can only assist that business if the owner is low or moderate income or they employ low or moderate income workers. There are communities that do provide some limited tax relief for senior citizens. That, of course, does shift that burden to everybody else in the community, and that benefit is not income tied. So just to use an example, if there was a special benefit in this community for senior citizens, I would receive it, just as much as someone living downtown in a $450 per month rental apartment might see it. So it can't be tied. It's not, there's no way we can tie it to income. It's tied to something that applies across the board, such as age.
Yeah, I would understand that it wouldn't necessarily apply to income when you're talking about seniors. And I understand that you can't explicitly say it's tied to income. I guess my question is, what other categories of individuals could be provided with that kind of rebate? Could we, for instance, identify folks who are in a particularly high-risk job situation, if they're working at the hospital, if they're one of our first responders? Could we identify people by other kinds of categories, people who live in the city of Lewiston and own small businesses here? I guess my question is, what does the state law allow when it comes to getting creative with property tax rebates?
They allow only a couple of things. One is, as was mentioned, you could do it's a local addition to the homestead program for senior citizens. I think you may be able, and I have to go back and research this, to do an add-on for everyone on the homestead program, but I'm not sure about that one. And again, that's only for individuals who own their own properties and would qualify under the current homestead program. It would not, for example, benefit renters, nor would it benefit businesses.
So, Mr. Majerus Collins, I think if you have more suggestions, like these are good questions. It's just that we need to get to the school side of it. Like, our job isn't to help the city figure out ways to be creative. That's the council's sort of job. But definitely you could contribute to that conversation. What we need to be asking is what we can do on our side of the budget, perhaps, to help, or if there are questions regarding how some of our funding can be shifted or things of that nature. I think we need to move on.
So I would, yeah, I understand. I certainly don't want to. My, I guess, point in all of these questions is that it's been expressed that there's a belief by some folks that we can't have a tax increase. I'm trying to get the information to determine whether that's something that I think is a fair operating assumption as well. So that's just the only reason why I'm asking these kinds of questions, but I'm happy to move on to the next person.
Okay. And I actually think that is something, again, the council is saying, the city council is saying that they don't want, that's their goal. So we are just trying to match up to that. And I think if you do have concerns about that, then definitely speaking with the person that's your representative and voicing those things at city council meetings makes sense too.
Could I just add just briefly, we all recognize Lewiston is one of the poorest communities in the state, and there are many property owners in our community that struggle every single day. And with the ongoing financial crisis with COVID-19, the last thing we want to do is to force people out of their house. And originally it was $1.30 something to our mill rate, which would have been devastating to, I think, a significant portion of the poorest people in our community. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Ms. Whitlow?
I have no comments at this time or questions.
Thank you. Mr. Donovan?
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Whoops. I skipped Mr. Potvin. I'm so sorry. Sorry, Ron.
Well, of course, I'm going to have a couple questions. So, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Barrett, so 2008 in Auburn, when the last recession hit, we saw a reduction of $3 million in state funding on both sides of the house, and that's Auburn. And I can't imagine that Lewiston's going to be a whole lot different from that kind of an impact. This is even worse. My questions regard to this CARES Act money. Our reductions in revenue are a direct result of the coronavirus. So I guess I'd be curious if legal has had the opportunity to review, the use for the CARES Act money, and that, the fact we're getting less revenue is coronavirus related. And if that be the case, why wouldn't we be able to use these CARES Act money to fill those revenue voids that are directly related? So I don't know if you guys went down that road with legal yet to review that. I just say the impact's going to be outstanding. The second part is CIP question. I got something from Ed on how much you guys were looking at reducing what you were going to do for CIP. I didn't get that total number. I was wondering what the number was you guys decided on for total CIP this year. And with that, I was just wondering if Ed knew off the top of his head, what is the percentage of assets that the school has in relation to the whole city? So I'll leave that.
I'll start with what I think is the easier one to answer, which is the CARES Act and federal funding question. We have been working with both our local or federal delegation and with a lot of the what I'll call the municipal organizations, National League of Cities, and other people, trying to pursue what I would call some general financial assistance for local government. Everything that I've seen, everything I've heard is that all of the money that's coming down for CARES is specifically related to paying for additional expenses that result from the CARES issue itself. In addition, the money that's coming down to Maine is coming down to the state. The state then is going to decide what to do with it. So we don't even know how much and how that's going to be allocated to the local municipalities. The only governments that got CARES support are state government and municipalities with over 500,000 people. So all of the CARES money is going to the state of Maine. That has not yet been determined how to allocate it out, but everything that we have seen has basically said that the money has to be used for CARES related expenses. There has been an effort in Congress to get what I would call some general fiscal relief for state and local government. That's been debated in both of the last two bills that were discussed in Congress, and in neither bill did that include any general fiscal relief. So we're going to continue to look. Obviously, if we find any way that we can use that money to offset expenses, we're certainly going to try to do that, but it's not going to be easy. On the LCIP side, in terms of a bond issue, I believe that we will be coming up fine with our final proposal to the council that will be below the 80% limit. Our 80% limit says that we will only borrow 80%, no more than 80% of how much we've paid off on average over the last 3 years. So as I recall, that's going to be somewhere in the range of $7 to $8 million. We have also in recent years been appropriating somewhere between $2.5 and $3.5 million in fund balance toward capital items. We were looking at doing something similar this year. We've basically, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, cut that in half. So we're looking at dramatically reducing the capital that we're going to be acquiring next year. I think our capital plan started off probably asking for something in the range of $15, $16 million. And I think we'll be down in the range of 7 to 8. In terms of assets, I'd have to go back and pull out the city's financial reports to look at that. And those things are a little bit misleading in that those mostly in government world, you carry your assets at original purchase price, not necessarily depreciated over time. So it's a little bit difficult to tell. I would assume quickly that probably in terms of buildings, the school department has significantly more assets than we do. In terms of equipment, we may have more than you do simply because of our public works fleet. We could dig those numbers out for you.
Yeah. So you're looking at about a $7.5 million. Now, is it my understanding that you guys wanted to see a reduction in our CIP request, or are you okay with what we move forward with?
It has been discussed. There was some discussion about number one, using some excess bond proceeds from other projects and some money that's left over from those projects, and also some premium that we get on selling bonds to replace some of the borrowing that was looked at on the school side. So that would be using funds that were not used by school for other projects to replace, I think it's primarily the security issue at the Dingley School. And then some question has been raised about whether the parking lot at McMahon School could be put off for a year.
Okay. I just make the general statement because I've been one of the hardest voices to talk about CIP. When I was on the council in Auburn, we destroyed the Auburn School Department by not giving them their share of CIP, and watched those buildings just deteriorate, watch the infrastructure deteriorate, all for the sake of budget. All I'm saying, the point I want to make is fairness, that from my numbers, from what I've been able to dig up, I'm thinking that the school department's got about a third of the assets of this city. And if you're going forward with a $7.5 million CIP, I think in fairness that the school department should be looking at being able to utilize a third of that CIP, where we're holding a third of the assets of this city. And I think there are other more pending issues that weren't presented this year that, given if we had that opportunity, we'd be able to address the HVAC at the middle school and other pieces that I've watched schools deteriorate by not addressing these things now. I'm just saying, maybe in the future, if we could talk about how to equitably divide up the CIP. And that's the point I make, is that the CIP is asset management, to keep your assets whole. And where we're holding a third, I think that the city should recognize that in future planning. And that's why I'm very hard about being a vote to maintain exactly what we asked for this year. I think we should be at 3 million. I think it's terrible that we're going forward. So that's just my comments I have, and thank you.
I'll be glad to put some of those numbers together for you, but just as a quick measurement, the debt service payment by the city projected for next year on its outstanding debt is $9.1 million. The debt service expected on school expenses next year is $8.4 million. Last year, the voters and the city council approved $10 million for the high school expansion. And a few years ago, we also approved $10 million for the middle school expansion. We also added extra classrooms. All of this has been supported by the city. So I think if you go back and look over the last 8 or 10 years, the school department, in terms of overall city borrowing, has seen a considerable percentage of that amount.
I appreciate those numbers, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Kayer, if you wanted to add something, and then we are going to be talking about LCIP as a later agenda item as a committee. So we can talk more about it then. Mr. Potman, Mr. Kayer, did you have something to add?
Yeah, just briefly, I think Lewiston has a long history of investing in our schools' maintenance. And I think that's obvious by looking at the conditions of schools across the river compared to Lewiston schools.
Okay.
That was a point taken. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I think we hit Miss Ray. Jeez.
I mean, I am a member of the council that is delivering this message, being in the unique situation of being privy to both sides of the conversation. I just want to share that I'm an incredibly lucky individual in this moment where I am working my full hours from home. I have enough support that I don't need to leave my home and put myself at risk. And I am still budgeting differently for my mortgage and my taxes. And so I get the point that You know, there may be some who are definitely more vulnerable, but I think we really want to help everyone out. And just because of the work I do, you know, I've been reading a lot about how people who are millennials, basically anyone under 45, is being incredibly impacted economically by this pandemic. Those over 45 as well, of course, but you know, this is the second once in a lifetime economic downturn that we're experiencing, first in 2008 and now 12 years later. And so this is something that will take about 10 years for the generation of, I guess now 30 somethings to recover from. And so any way we can help preserve and just hold off on this tax increase is going to be very appreciated by the people who own property here and pay into the tax system. And so I was at first very reticent to bring forward more or to suggest more reductions on the school side, knowing that the school department stepped up before even being asked and made an attempt. But when it came down to the fact that we would need a force reduction on the city side to make that happen, to make those numbers work, and that's not necessarily true for the school side, that is really what convinced me that we need to hold the line at zero. And I'm very grateful for the school committee and the district leadership for entertaining this. And I'm really hopeful that we can make it work with the city.
Thanks, Ms. Ray. Mr. Finn, do you have any questions or anything to add?
I do. No questions at all. And I appreciate all the input we've already gotten. Love to hear the passion behind the city and the school system as well. One thing that we have got to be mindful of is that the CARES Act is obviously by its very name a result of this COVID-19 and the impact that COVID-19 has had on every city in Maine and across the country as well. Because we are fortunate enough to be able to have landed or will be landing a pretty significant amount of that. Our take in administration has been to do everything we possibly can. We always talk about exhausting every effort to make sure and to understand that this is not necessarily a windfall as so much as it's a means for us to be able to keep our communities whole. And what Bobby will present this evening, I think addresses literally everything that we've heard this evening, because Bobby and I have been talking a lot all day. So I'm really excited to hear these things when the committee asked Bobby to speak.
Thank you. Ms. Avery or Ms. Paquette, do you have any questions? Anything you needed to, okay. Anything closing, Mr. Barrett or Mr. Kayer, that you would like to add to the conversation?
I'm all set.
No, I just appreciate the time the committee gave us this evening.
Okay. We're going to move on with our agenda. Feel free to stay or go, Mr. Barrett, Mr. Kayer. We appreciate you coming in, answering our questions, listening to us. We've got some hard work to do, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to agenda item number 4 to discuss possible adjustments to the FY21 budget according to recommendations made by the Lewiston City Council. And I believe I'm going to just start with Mr. Finn, and you can delegate appropriately.
Absolutely. I'd like to ask Chief Avery, who's worked incredibly hard on this, to present on this, please.
I can do that. So in your packet, you have a memo that I wrote to Superintendent Finn. And in that memo, there are 3 different components found there. One is over the budget reduction recommendations. There's another component, the LCIP recommendation, and then the third component is the authorization to transfer. And I'd like to go through this memo line by line so that the public clearly understands what is in this memo. And we can, and I'd recommend that we talk about each component one at a time, and then you can ask questions if you want after each component. So we're going to start with the budget reduction recommendation, and this is crafted and recommended based on everything that Mayor Kayer spoke about, as well as City Administrator Barrett. And I do want to echo Superintendent Finn and the mayor, as well as our city administrator. We've worked very, very hard together to look at the crisis that we're in as very holistically versus, the city versus the school department. We've tried really, really hard to make it work for both sides, and I believe that we have found a way. And so the recommendation that I am making before you tonight is to reduce an additional a little over $1 million from the FY21 budget to help keep that tax rate at zero. Now, I'm going to say this before I get into it, what makes up that $1 million. I want to say to you, and I don't typically say things like this, but I'm going to. I am not losing 1 second of sleep over this recommendation at all. The CARES Act, and I did put an FAQ in your packet that reviews what the CARES Act is all about and how we may use that. And we are anticipated to get a little over $2 million from the CARES Act. And as such, just about all of the recommendations that are before you can be made up through that CARES Act funding. So hence why I personally am not losing sleep over this recommendation. So the recommendation consists of reducing several articles. Article 1 would be regular instruction, and that's $247,226. Article 2 is special education at $68,000. Article 4 is other instruction at $261,186.95. Article 5 is student and staff support of $374,971. And Article 9, facilities at $50,000. The grand total is $1,001,383.95. The reductions come from a further reduction to Anthem in the amount of $218,000. That's justifiable because our Anthem rates came in much lower than we ever anticipated. So there's we don't lose sleep over that one. A reduction in summer school in the amount of $246,687. Professional development in the amount of $186,501. Technology, K2 iPads in the amount of $97,226. Additional technology supplies and equipment, such as interactive projectors, K2 software, cart locks, Apple TVs, headphones, in the amount of $188,470. Extracurricular travel in the amount of $14,500, and the facilities assessment in the amount of $50,000. That makes up that $1,001,384. I go on to state in this memo that, as we know, the CARES Act provides funding to respond to COVID-19 emergencies for K-12 schools. Due to the hardship that COVID-19 is having on our community, as well as to our school district, we believe the expenditures that are recommended to be reduced in Article 1, partially in Article 1, 4, and 5 can be supported with CARES Act funding. The total to be supported by the CARES Act is $718,384. If these budget reductions are made, this will reflect an FY21 budget of $88,614,478.05, which results in a 2.92% overall increase in the general fund. The adult ed budget remains the same at $787,593. This results in an estimated 41-cent decrease on the mill rate for the school department over last year. So those are my recommendations as it relates to budget reductions. I'm happy to discuss or take any questions that you may have. If you want me to continue on, I can do that too.
No, I don't want to go on to the LCIP stuff, which seems to be next. That is a separate agenda item. So you had mentioned talking about specifics, like
You're muted.
Sorry. So you had talked about breaking this down into specific components. I think that will be much easier than trying to have committee members answer for the whole lot. So I'd like to talk about first Article 1, regular instruction reductions, and the list that you gave there for members. So members, if you could please keep in mind Article 1, regular instruction, and what's listed there, and questions you have specifically for Ms. Avery on those items or that article. So we will start with Mr. Damon.
Does this result in any staff reductions, Bobby?
This does not.
So this money is coming from partially from benefits and other pieces of the non-salary piece of it?
That's correct.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of money to take right out of regular education, but I'm more worried, I think, about special education thing. But
if I could say something to that, the Article 1 for regular instruction, the bulk of that actually is Anthem.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not tied directly to instructional equipment or whatever, although there is some that is tied to instructional equipment in Article 1, which are the K2 iPads in the amount of $97,000. We believe we can fund those through the CARES Act. So our regular instruction will not be harmed.
okay, I'm good for this one.
Yep, gotcha. Okay, so do you believe, Bobby, that the CARES Act will pay for the iPads because we need to have a way to offer instruction in home?
That is exactly the reason why. And if you look at the FAQ, it does speak to that. So we feel quite confident that we can do this.
Excellent. Mr. Majoris Collins.
I guess my question on all of these articles is going to be pretty similar. My first question is, in making these reductions, are we gaining access to CARE funds or CARES Act funds that we otherwise wouldn't be getting? I.e., if we bought the iPads ourselves, then we wouldn't have a need to buy iPads, and then so we wouldn't have something to apply for funding for? Or are we pretty much getting this money regardless, and so the recommendation is we can use the money to pay for XYZ stuff?
Yes, so the CARES Act is part of, it flows through our title formula, so we're getting that regardless. And it's due to hardships for public school systems, which is where we're at. We're in a very big hardship. So it just makes great sense to me that we would be very fiscally responsible and good partners with the city to utilize the CARES Act for exactly what it's intended for, which is presented to you this evening. In regards to anything above and beyond that $718,000 that I said CARES would fund, those are just responsible reductions that we should make, period, just because of our Anthem rates came in much lower. So that's just something we should do automatically. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think it does. So to try to summarize, then, we're going to get this money consistent with what we're entitled to as a district, and the recommendation is to use the money to pretty much to reduce our expenditures, as opposed to using it to do more stuff. Is that
That's
a fair assumption? Okay.
That's very fair. We're not looking to supplement with the CARES money. We're not looking to expand on our programming. We're looking to use it for exactly what it's intended for, and that is to help us out given the circumstances.
Okay. Ms. Whitlow.
The only question I have is I was just curious of when do we expect that funding to come in?
Yeah. So, yep. So, and you'll see some timing in that FAQ. We're expected to get the application by the end of this month, and then they have 30 days to review that application and do all that they need to do to release that funding. So we're talking probably June-ish, the June-ish timeframe. That would be my guess. Karen, if you have any other guess, then, or a better guess.
No, the only information I have is what you have as well on the FAQ.
Okay.
So this money isn't guaranteed. We still have to apply for it. Correct?
Yeah, so there is an application process, but it's well, I'm never going to use the word guaranteed, but it's pretty darn close to that. Yes.
Mr. Finn, go ahead. Are you trying to chime in, sir?
Yeah, when I go like that, I don't know, I'll go like this. So, so we did receive notification from the DOE today that the states received their 98.5 million already. And so then those FAQs come out as well. So the states got that. We've received what I would consider to be reasonable assurance from the commissioner of what we'll be, what we'll be getting as well. So it's as, I guess, guaranteed as anything in education. So hopefully that helps.
And did they tell you anything about like the funding formula for these schools? Is it certain schools that are lower income get more? We don't know that.
I can answer that. So it, as Bobby said, it is dependent on our title formula. So we as a school system get a percentage of what the state has available based on that formula. Something that's a little bit different is that we are normally with our funding through title, it's only our schools K through 8, but with the CARES Act money, we're able to use that money K through 12, which helps with a lot of what Bobby has put in the document. And something else that's different in our title, normally title funding, normally it's allocated to schools based on what we call rank and distribution or their level of need. And this money will not be managed that way. We're able to use it as a district K through 12 to meet the needs. I will say one thing about the application. I think the amount of money we can pretty much, we're pretty much guaranteed to say that's how much we're going to get. The state may come back and say, you need to tweak this or you need to adjust this in the application. But they might just give us that feedback to do that within the application. But other than that, I think we can say with confidence that that's the amount of money we'll receive.
Great. And one question. You had mentioned, Bobby, that we'd be getting around 2 million. So what would we do with the extra money? Is that something that you would come back to us on?
Yes, so if our calculations are correct, which I think they are, it'll be a little over $2 million. And the remaining balance, we're still in the strategy phase of that. There's going to be a lot of, well, I think there'll be a lot of unanticipated additional COVID expenses that we really need to be mindful of. So having that money there to help us cover those additional expenses is going to be quite helpful.
Mr. Finn wants to add something.
Yes, absolutely.
I saw you.
So I think I have the black shirt, so I'm going to go in front of the black shirt. So one thing that we want to be really mindful of is that, we can't count on this again. And so, I'm in collaboration with a lot of other superintendents across the state. And I listen very, very carefully. And as I hear folks talk about wanting to add personnel or hire personnel, you're literally kicking the can down the road because you won't get that next year. So where I'm very impressed with what Bobby and Karen have come up with here is to look at these one-time expenses that that we'll be able to knock out with this and still maintain our responsibility with the city. The second piece to it too is that you're going to figure with about the 1.1, well, actually about $783,000 that we'll be using from CARES. There is a balance left over there, and when we look at the impact that that this closure, if you will, has had on us, and we look at where we're going to need to make up in terms of remediation, getting kids caught back up. We don't want to have those huge gaps in there. So we'd like to be discussing down the road with the committee a way that we can, enhance that program and to kind of make up for that over the course of next year. And obviously, if we're listening to the CDC out of Atlanta and they're talking about how brace yourselves for the fall, because this could very well happen again, we want to be able to have our go bags ready. Let's go ahead and be able to deploy our laptops, our software, and jump right into that phase 3. And there's a little bit of work that has to be done to get there. We'll be seeking some guidance from the committee on that as well. But fortunately, because we've been so methodical in what we've done, I should say, and what we've done to this point, we've learned a lot and have a lot of good data around what we're going to need to do over the course of this next year, as we're going to be in that recovery phase all year long.
And if I could just add to that, on the operations side, we are evaluating where the gaps are in each one of our schoolhouses as it relates to technology, so that in the event that we do have to maintain distance learning, that we have the appropriate devices, and everything that goes along with that, so that our students can continue to learn from home. So I anticipate that some of that money will help fill that gap as well.
All set, Ms. Whitlow? Okay. Mr. Potvin? You're still muted, sir.
Hello. Todd, as far as Article 1 goes, just a question about vision. Are we moving down the road where we wanted to be, establishing the new innovations we wanted to do? Is there anything getting kicked back into a back seat with this change?
No, and this is what I'm most impressed with, is that we kept in mind, Bobby, you probably have right in front of you your little laminated card right there with the goals to this budget, and you remember these all got passed out. We've made a commitment, Mr. Potvin, to make sure that in all that we do and all that we recommend, that those goals are kept in mind. We're not willing to compromise that, although we're willing to go above and beyond and do more than our part for the city. We're not willing to compromise what our values are. And we'll recall back in January when we came up with the 4 goals for this committee that we came up with moving forward. And at no point in time were we willing to come to this committee and ask you to compromise what we've committed to. So in terms of some of the innovative things that we'd like to do, nothing has been taken off of that. We've been able to find a way to supplant with the CARES money, because the CARES money is right in alignment with what we're trying to do, so that we can maintain that. I'm thoroughly excited about it. I'm not discouraged by any means at all, because the first thing I did ask Bobby was about the quality of our journey to become a world-class educational institution. And I'm very happy with where we are right now.
Okay. And Bobby, of the 700,000 plus we're using out of the CARES money, how much is not one time that we'll have to worry about finding money for next year?
Yeah, so to my knowledge, as I look at it, it's all pretty much one-time only stuff now, with the exception that when we start talking about replacement of K2 iPads and what that replacement cycle looks like. So of course, that wouldn't be next year or the year after, would probably be 4 years down the road, estimated. And there's some professional development, as I mentioned, reductions. So it really depends on what our planning is and what our budget discussions are for future years. We are not zeroing out professional development at all in the general fund. There's still money sitting there for that. So I think that it depends on what our goals are in the next budget cycle and the budget cycle after that.
Good.
Mr. Donovan?
Just want to say thank you for all that input. I don't have any additional questions at this time. Thank you.
Can I ask you to move your camera a little bit down, because I can only see the top of your head most of the time? Okay, that's good.
Backwards. Sorry, I keep switching between leaning on the desk and not.
I think we all do this and we all rock a little bit at some point. So it's hard to keep still during the whole thing, but for the public, thank you so much. Okay, Miss Ray, you're up.
So I just wanted to ask Madam Chair, my questions are slightly more generalized. Are we going to wrap up? Would you prefer that I hold those to the end?
I think that makes more sense because they might get answered along the way for some of them with each article, if you don't mind. Okay.
Then I don't have questions.
Okay. I just have a clarifying question, Miss Avery. So for for summer school, is that other instruction Article 4?
That's right.
Okay. So Article 2, special education, you have $68,000 listed here. Looking for the exact, what is the exact impact? I'm looking in the paragraph.
It's all Anthem. It's all health insurance.
That's all health insurance?
No, that's right. No impact to programming at all.
Okay. I'm just going to ask if you could hold up your hand if you have anything on that one, because it is pretty cut and dry. Do I need to go through everybody? We're good? Miss Ray, was that part of your, okay. So we will move on to Article 4 then, other instruction. So I will go right to Mr. Damon to ask what questions he might have about this article and other instruction.
Yeah, I guess maybe just a quick clarification of what falls in that. I know that 21st century falls in there, I think, and stipends. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. It's all summer school and co-curricular and extracurricular activities.
So is some of that reduction in stipends for things that we're not probably going to be able to support at the same level we did last year?
No, the Article 4 reduction has to do solely with summer school.
Solely with summer school.
That's correct.
So it's the assumption that based on where we're at now, that we're really not going to have a summer school?
So there's two things for my rationale on this. The first one being that if you remember the 21st century grant, we may get funding for that. We don't know, right? We won't find out until after the budget has passed. So that's one rationale. But the second one is the CARES Act, that funding. If you read that FAQ, you'll see that will support summer school activities. So in my mind, being fiscally responsible, I think it makes great sense to do that.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So in other words, Miss Avery, we're not cutting summer school. Summer school funding can be covered by the CARES Act funding.
That is correct.
Okay. Just didn't want anybody to freak out like I did the first time I heard it.
No.
Okay, perfect. Mr. Majoris Collins.
I don't have any specific informational questions.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Whitlow?
I do not have any more questions.
Okay, Mr. Potvin? Okay. Mr. Donovan?
No questions. Thank you.
Ms. Ray, you're waiting? Or you?
Well, no, is extracurricular travel not covered under this article? Is it under a different one?
It is. That's correct. It's under this
Okay.
one. That extracurricular travel of $14,500 was a request with the idea that we would be increasing our sports, and I'm wondering if we actually will be doing that or not. So it makes sense to me to just cut that right off the bat.
Okay, and were there additional savings due to the cancellation of the spring sports season for travel already?
Yeah, so I haven't crunched for this year. You're talking about this year. So I haven't crunched any numbers on that, but I'm quite positive that there is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And then Article 5, student and staff support. Can you, just quickly say what those things were again?
Okay, so student and staff support has to do with professional development. Let's see, it also has to do with a whole lot of technology to the tune of, I think it was $188,000.
Okay. Mr. Damon, questions on that?
Yeah, I know that it's a pretty big hit to professional development in this one. I know that was really one of the things that we were hoping to really push forward on in this coming year, and I realize it's extraordinary. But you said that this doesn't eliminate that, but it's definitely going to reduce the amount of staff development we're going to be able to afford, right?
Actually, it doesn't reduce it at all, because the CARES Act will also it'll pick up that cost as well. So there is no reduction to professional development. Think of it as shifting funding sources. That's what we're doing.
Okay. One other thing, if there were expensed but unused funds from 2020, can that be carried over into 21? Like if there were savings from the spring sports travel funds and stuff like that?
So fund balance in FY20 feeds into the FY22 budget, not the 21 budget. So yes, we would be able to use it in the 22 budget, another budget, but not next year's.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Mr. Finn, do you want to talk a little bit about the difference? I think the professional development question is a good one. It seems that professional development from the CARES Act money would go more toward like preparing our teachers to use Ingenuity and all the other tools and technology that they might not have now. And will there be regular funds for you to move forward with the kind of professional development you talked to us about before COVID hit?
Yes, we'll still be able to do all the PD. That's obviously one of my passions that we were looking to do in the first place. So there's not an item on there that we're not going to be able to address with our CARES money. It all does tie in directly to what we talked about, improved instruction. So it's all really about improved instruction, whether that be becoming better at remote learning, or whether that be increasing our leadership IQs across the district. Actually, more so than ever, we need that now. So I was very pleased that Chief Avery was able to come up with a way to find a different funding source for the exact same professional development. And because that checked that box, I felt really good about it.
And it will support social emotional learning still, because that is a huge part of what's going on right now, correct?
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
correct.
Fantastic. Okay, Mr. Majerus-Collins, anything specific for this one?
No specific questions, no.
Excellent. Ms. Whitlow?
Nothing now.
Mr. Potvin?
Yes, technology, Bobby. I'm used to budgets that usually equipment and large scale operational equipment and technology are usually moved over to CIP. Is that ever looked at all in addition to what we've done with the CARES Act? Is there any opportunity to go that direction?
So I believe in prior years, many years ago, we actually did that with our laptops. We actually have worked our way out of the LCIP and got them into the operational budget, which I personally think is the right thing to do. The reductions that we're requesting or recommending to make this evening, I'm looking at the list right now. It's all things like projectors and document cameras and smaller ticket items that add up, right? So things like, well, there's let's see, 5, so $1,000 item here, $150 item there, $7,000 item here. They're really small, but there's just a lot of them and they add up. So I wouldn't recommend that we put them into a capital project. I'd keep them right in the operational budget.
Okay, yeah, I was just saying in terms of what we're going through right now, not on a regular basis, but that's all I got. Thanks.
Mr. Donovan?
No specific questions. Thank you.
Ms. Ray?
Forgive me for this because I'm just trying to keep track. So we're reducing $1 million. 218K of that can be explained by Anthem. 718K of that can be explained by the CARE Act. So that leaves 64K unaccounted for. 50
Yes.
of that is Article 9. Where is the other 14 sprinkled in here? That's where I'm at. Sorry,
So
I don't know
you're
if that makes
missing-
more sense.
You're missing the trips, the
Trips.
extracurricular trips.
Okay.
Yes.
So everything else that we're going to talk about is covered by CARES. So facilities will be like the only other discussion point here.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I needed that to understand that.
No problem. Oh shoot, I had a question, but that totally threw me off. Okay. We're gonna move on to, oh, I know what I was gonna say. I think that there's going to be more support for technology, broadband, and those kinds of items coming from the state, even beyond what the CARES Act. If I'm reading the tea leaves properly, just because we're very ill-equipped as a state, especially past Cumberland County, to deal with any of this stuff. And again, since there's all this talk about the fall or any other times that this may come into play, I don't think this is where the technology piece is going to end. And I know folks like Senator King, who was part of the original MLTI project, is on top of this kind of stuff. So I think it's not irresponsible to say we're going to do some one-time purchases, knowing that there will probably be more support behind that. I think that might be a fair statement. So the last article will be facilities, and that was just the assessment. But I thought the audit was $80,000. So could you speak to that?
I can. So you're right. The assessment is $80,000. I'm asking to reduce that by 50 and leaving 30 in the event that we do end up doing that assessment. That facilities assessment will have at least some funding there to help support that.
Mr. Damon, comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's legit. I'm still not convinced that spending any of it at this particular point in time makes sense, particularly if we're going to have LCIP restrictions, because those reports get stale very quickly. And I think we need to be cautious how we do proceed along that lines. I think that internally we can do some of that work and produce something that will allow us to produce the right type of requests in the LCIP, but that I guess becomes an open question. I guess LCIP we're going to talk about in a little bit, so I'll withhold that for now, but I'm all in favor of that reduction for sure.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Majerus Collins?
No specific questions on this item.
Ms. Whitlow?
What is the LCIP reduction that the city is doing on our behalf?
So we're actually going to talk about that next.
Yeah.
Discussion.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
I was kind of commenting off of Mr. Damon's comment, so I'm all set at this point.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of pull those things apart. And because this is only talking about the audit or the assessment, but then you start thinking about all of those things. I'm sorry about that. Mr. Potvin, I know your LCIP.
Yeah, I don't have anything on facilities, but I want to jump back an article because you jumped over transportation and asked that same question about CIP with school in regards to school buses and vehicles. If we looked at that.
That part of student staff and support? Where's
No.
transportation?
Transportation line.
So we don't, transportation isn't part of this recommendation this evening. So are you asking a global question or about transportation? Are you referencing the extracurricular trips?
Well, I'm just referencing the addition, don't we still have the addition of 2 school buses this year? Or no?
So we're just talking about the reductions in Article 1, 2, 4, 5, and 9 that she has listed in her budget memo. That's why I said, where did you get transportation? I didn't think I skipped anything.
All right. No, I thought we were talking in general budget reductions. So, okay, I'm good.
Okay. Miss Ray?
Mr. Donovan or me?
Oh, wait.
Sorry, I wasn't
Yeah,
ready.
no, Mr. Donovan. Jeez, I'm crow.
No specific questions. Thank you.
Now it's you, Miss Ray.
Okay. I don't know how stuff go. Do not collect $200. So I'm just trying to understand better why we wouldn't reduce either the full 80 or keep it. Could you do that again?
Yes.
Sorry.
I can. So my goal was to hit $1 million, $1 million reduction. That's where I personally feel comfortable as far as the CARES Act and spending down some of that CARES Act. I also know that Member Damon is quite passionate about this. And so I was trying to strike a semi-healthy compromise between the two and still meet my objective. So I think I did that.
Okay. And so we would, if we were not to execute a facilities assessment next year, we would roll that 30,000 forward and have a budget request of 50,000 to add to it to execute in FY22.
If that's what we chose to do, yes.
Okay.
Or
thank you.
whatever the cost is at that time in the next budget cycle.
Okay. Thanks.
Awesome. All right. Did anybody have anything on the full, a question that didn't get answered as we went through each article? This might be a good time for you, Ms. Ray, to jump in with any other things that you had.
Yeah, I have 2 remaining. So these reductions, do we still reach minimum required local share?
Yes.
Great. And then, so I was on a call earlier and there was a member of DOE on it. And so just what you were all talking about before with the CARES Act, there was a side conversation that happened about equity and how Maine was kind of inequitable to start with this whole process. And so it sounds like there will be efforts to support that going forward, especially in terms of access to technology. But the other thing that came up that I wanted to ask you about, Bobby, so I know we have someone who manages grants and things like that. Is there someone on staff already who will be able to report on the funds that we receive for CARES?
Absolutely. Yep. She's
Okay.
awesome. Top notch.
Yeah,
She's great.
can you remind me her name?
Tammy Bureau.
Thank you. I knew we had someone doing this great work and
He's-
managing all of that.
He's
But
exceptional.
it sounded like it's going to be a bit of a lift. And so I'm glad we have someone in place who's already worked on these before.
I'm not worried at all about that lift. We're quite capable and yeah, we're going to be just fine on that.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Potvin?
Bobby, I just want to be clear on the numbers moving forward. So we reduced approximately $1 million. Of that $1 million, 700 plus is coming from the CARES. We're reducing 300,000 on our own.
Yep.
This combined million is coming off of the local allocation line
On the revenue side, are you talking about?
on the revenue.
That's correct.
Okay, so our local allocation will be moved down to, what's the number?
It will be 200. Hold on, I can get it for you. 200, just under 215,000.
Of an increase or reduction?
It's a reduction, a big reduction over last year.
So if we're counting $700,000 of the CARES Act as revenue, why wouldn't there be more reduction on the revenue side?
So the CARES Act revenue would never hit the general fund. It would hit a special purpose fund. So it's very, very separate. It's not part of the general fund whatsoever. You have to keep that in mind. So all of our grants are very much outside of the general fund.
Okay, so keeping that in mind, we're not going to be spending 700,000 when we're being subsidized from the SCARES Act. So is the 700,000 coming off of the local share, or is that coming off of our carry forward?
It's
I just
coming
wanna
off
know
from,
what-
so it's coming off from the local share.
So the local share should reduce more than just the 200,000 then.
It's actually has been reduced by that $1 million. So the local share originally, well, one of the drafts, the latest draft, was $1.2 million. If you take that $1 million reduction that I'm recommending, that leaves the local share at $214,567. So it's reducing the local share by that $1 million on the revenue side. On the expenditure side, it's reducing the expenditure side by these articles we just talked about by that $1 million. So the offset to the expenditure within the revenue budget is sitting in the additional local allocation.
Okay, so we're not going to be touching any of the carry forward, the 3.9 million?
That's correct.
We're still going to do that, just the
That's
same?
correct. That's correct.
Okay, thank you for that.
Mr. Damon?
I know it may be kind of a sidebar discussion maybe, or even just an odd question, but isn't there a certain local share that we're supposed to make sure that we contribute to education? And that by this reduction, do we no longer meet that, so we don't get our full state revenue share?
So
That was Ms. Ray's question about the minimum local share, correct? Can you talk about that though and explain what that means?
yes. So the state tells us that we have to raise a certain amount, right? And we do. Lewiston has always raised the required minimum. This year, actually, FY20 was the first year that we were able to raise additional local, which Lewiston has never done before in the past. So in the FY20, so we're going to meet our required minimum. In the FY21 budget, what we're doing is we're actually reducing an additional local amount. So there's no worry about the required minimum. My concern in all of this very much is like everybody else's, is that carry forward number. But it's also reducing that additional local allocation. It was hard to get that there. We're taking that out to save on taxes. But that's being fiscally responsible in times like this.
So we will still meet that state requirement.
We will.
Okay.
Anything else before we move on to the next agenda item? Hearing through, making sure. Okay. Fantastic. All right. So agenda item number 5, to discuss possible adjustments to the Lewiston School Department's portion of the LCIP. Who's presenting on that? Is it Bobby Avery?
I can. Okay, so again, I'm going to read this right from the memo so that the public is clear about what I've written. In response to the City Council's concerns over the 80% debt ceiling we are obligated to adhere to, I'm recommending that we reduce our original request for funding, and I'm going to go over the original request. It's the request, actually, it's the one that you voted on and put forward to the City Council. McMahon Parking Lot Expansion Project of $600,000, the Dingley Security Project of $255,000, the Security Camera Project of $300,000. The total FY21 LCIP request is $1,155,000. That is what you all approved and we brought forward to the City Council. In response to what we heard the other evening in regards to the 80% debt ceiling, my recommendation is as follows. to defer the McMahon parking lot expansion project to a future year, to fund the Dingley security project with bond surplus funding, and to maintain the LCIP request for the security camera project. That would make the total revised FY21 LCIP request of $300,000. And then the total bond surplus transfer request, which we'll talk about in the next section, would be $255,000.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Avery. All right, Mr. Damon.
I very much, I think, in line with where Ron's at, that the LCIP stuff really needs to be supported at the full level. Considering the fact that bond rates currently, I think, are 0 or 0.25%, seems like an incredibly poor time to not go out and borrow for long-term sustainability of what we're doing. And particularly with McMahon, part of the reason why we have to do something with the McMahon parking is because the city is going to build a fire station on North Temple Street. And that's going to cost $4.7 million by the time they're all said and done. So our request to develop some off-street parking in support of our staff, in support of the facility as a whole, seems to me to be perfectly logical, and I think we should leave it in.
Okay. I think there was a conversation about the fire station project during the joint meeting, but I can't recall the details of that. Ms. Ray, could you speak to that? Is that actually going to move forward this year, you think, or will there be a delay with that as well?
So the conversation, as I recall it, I don't have minutes in front of me or anything, but as I recall it, the mayor made the suggestion that we perhaps reduce the LCIP request for the fire station currently, given that we are over about a year behind in that process. And so we still have funds left over from where we left off with that process, is my understanding. When it comes to my turn, I can also weigh in on McMahon parking lot on the other side as well.
Okay. Mr. Majerus Collins.
I guess my question would be a procedural one. We've made a recommendation to the city on this. Has there been a vote to accept or reject or change our proposed slice of the LCIP on the city side, or is this just sort of informal, what people are saying sort of thing, like it is with the budget?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Ms. Ray.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was directed towards me or not. So there, as far as, again, I recall, we have not accepted that recommendation. I did let the city council know about what had happened and what the votes were the first time around, because the recommendation was voted on and voted down, and then what is currently proposed, the 1.155 million, was voted on and carried forward. And I just was trying to give them all that information. It sounded like they still wanted us to come back because Ms. Avery had very thoughtfully already come up with the bond surplus suggestion prior to that, and Heather Hunter let us know that that existed. So it sounded like, and we have not accepted the recommendation yet in terms of procedure.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Majerus Collins? They didn't say yes. And as a matter of fact, there was vigorous conversation about that we had actually asked for more than what the city had actually proposed that we should be asking for. And if you recall our own vote, that's the way we went. So they were not in favor of that in the conversation that we had.
Right. Yeah. I guess what I'm wondering about with all of this is sort of the what the process is in terms of, we have this pending in front of the city council and the city council is going to say yes or no, or the city council can just change it and pass it however they want. And I mean, I guess this is also a broader budget question as well, where it's like, again, I'm finding everything a little bit disorienting in the sense that, actual votes aren't being taken. And it just sort of seems like, well, the feedback is, rather than, the city council, voted 5-2 that they're going to reject the LCIP thing because they think it's too much. Because that would give at least me a lot more guidance about, at the end of the day, we have to get city council approval and they took a vote. But when they don't take a vote, then they don't actually provide any guidance, at least in my view. So I don't have any other questions about it. I think we've talked about the LCIP a considerable amount in the past already. So.
Okay. I would say that it's a courtesy for them to give us feedback so they don't have to reject us. I think that that's because we're in a partnership with the city, and formal voting is, again, more of a formal process after you've gone through and vetted and gone back and forth in discussion as partners, is the way that it has been done. And I think it is a respectful process that way. But again, there are certain things where we are going to, I guess, hold our ground on certain things. And again, this is a little bit different because of the situation and trying to make a hard situation not as hard by working together. But so yeah, traditionally we've gone back and forth, and that's why the conversations happen between Ms. Avery and Ms. Hunter, so that numbers presented are real numbers that we can make conscious discussion about. And that's why Mr. Finn talks with Mr. Barrett, so that we don't end up just going back and forth. I guess I would equate it with the interest-based bargaining negotiations versus traditional, where you just put a proposal out, people say yes or no, and you pull it back, and there's no human element to it that way, and we don't get to really flesh out the why. So that's just my 2 cents on it. Miss Whitlow. You don't have anything? Okay. I didn't hear you at all. Okay. Miss, I hear you now. Yes.
I don't have anything right now. No.
Thank you. Mr. Potvin.
Okay, well, no surprise here. You know how I feel about the CIP. I feel we should be even adding more compared to where we should be. That being said, I think we've done our fair share of reducing the amount of the budget increase this year. They've come back a second time and asked us to reduce even more, of which Bobby and Todd and Karen have been able to make happen. And I'm okay with, Bobby, you talked about there's a bonding surplus that you're going to use. If that's something that's available, I'm okay with using that, but I don't want to go backwards. I think it's a terrible move to go backwards. I think we can stand on our ground because we've done our fair share with the reductions that we've had, and we're using this bonding surplus for one of the items. I would say, let's move forward, and I'm kind of with Kernan. I kind of want to hear a yay or a nay, of where we're at. I think what we're asking for is very, very fair, and we should stick with it.
Thank you, Mr. Potman. Mr. Donovan.
I don't have any questions. I support the cuts as they are proposed. We're definitely, I think it's reasonable that we've been asked. It's unusual that we've been asked to do 2 rounds of cuts. However, I personally can't say that it's unusual because I don't know personally based on personal experience. However, I think it's reasonable given the times and what we're going through right now. And I just wanted to have that comment out there. But I don't have any questions now.
Thank you. In some districts, this is not uncommon. They go back 3 or 4 times. So, I mean, we've had some luck, and I think there's been some times where it's been voted down, and that's a whole nother process we don't want to get into for sure. It causes a lot of anxiety for a lot of people. Miss Ray.
Thank you, and I hope the chair forgives that this might be a little long and winding, but I was going to say, just to start off, like, this is a new school committee with members who have not done a budget process before, and so moving it all virtual and into a pandemic is definitely not ideal. I really feel for the members who are experiencing this in this way. So I just wanted to say that to start out, because we've said that on the council side, but definitely I don't think we said it here. And I just wanted to recognize that. First, I'm going to correct myself on the fire station. So we are looking to defer the Main Street Station LCIP portion. Sabatis Street, which is the area by McMahon, is ready to start construction and looks like it's going to come in under budget. So we may have some funds saved there. So wanted to address that. McMahon parking, I actually am kind of in favor of keeping on for this year. So the counselor from Ward 4 has been working with a number of residents in the area who, it just sounds like a really unsafe situation out that way. And so I don't have all of the complaints that he's fielded and worked on so thoughtfully, but maybe I can reach out to him and ask him to elaborate on that a little bit more to give us more information. It sounds like those folks didn't reach out to any members of the school committee, went straight to the council. So I would be in favor of keeping that moving forward. Super in favor of using the bond surplus. And of funding the Dingley security project. So, I mean, even I, as a member of the council who's like, we should probably reduce the LCIP, I can see reasons for keeping McMahon and for funding all 3, 1 through bond surplus and 2 through the LCIP. The question I have for Bobby is, so Mr. Barrett was talking about the bond amount for the LHS expansion. So is that in the LCIP, and does all, I think it's 10 or 13 million hit next year?
So for FY21, you're talking about FY21, right?
No, I think
or 22.
22. Yeah, 22.
Okay. So yes, it comes in 22. For FY21, we will have an interest payment that is in the budget.
Okay, and what is the amount for FY22 for the expansion?
Oh, I don't have that off the top of my head. I don't know.
Any ballpark?
I don't know.
Mr. Damon might know. Mr. Damon might know.
It's currently budgeted at 13.4.
13.4 million.
Yeah.
And that would be phased over time?
Hopefully that would be completed for September of 21.
So you're not
it would carry into to fiscal 22, because we're at June 30. So it would carry into fiscal 22.
Okay. Bobby, what were you going to say?
So you're asking the total bond amount. You're not asking how much the payment is going to be. And that's what I thought you were asking.
I'm not sure what I was asking to be.
I thought you were asking payment, not the total. Payment. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't have my LCI book in front of me. Is that true? Hold on. Yeah, I have 18 binders and I don't know which one has the LCIP in it, but so it's hard to, I feel like I'm having a hard time talking about FY21 because I'm not looking at the years past that. And how does the LHS expansion play into future years? Because what it sounded like to me is that Mr. Barrett is saying, we want reductions this year because we are obligated to the citizens and voters on that $13.4 million bond at some point and in some way.
That's my understanding, is that the voters passed it and approved it. And that takes that out of that 80% expenditure, because the voters approved that in referendum. So
Okay.
that doesn't impact the 80%, which I think is this year is like 7.89 or something like that. Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that if I could just add, and I'm totally speculating here, but I think that they're at the city level, they're concerned about adding debt, bringing debt on and not having enough roll off to cover up or to make up for that debt coming on. At least that's what has been presented to me.
Okay.
And so when all of this was approved a year ago or however long that was, 2 years ago, whatever that was, we didn't know about COVID-19 and we didn't know that it was going to present such a hardship to our community. And so I believe that that is what they're speaking about, is their concern to bring debt on without enough rolling off.
Okay, that's helpful for context. I apologize. I told you it was going to be roundabout because I wasn't sure what I was asking. But so I, again, in support of moving forward the McMahon parking lot and the security upgrade and moving the the security cameras and moving the security project to bond funding, which would still require a vote from us, I think.
Which we're not doing tonight, but that's why we're having the discussion, so we can put it on the next agenda so we can vote on this stuff and move it forward. Other questions? Ms. Whitlow, I thought I saw your hand. Yep.
Yes, this actually might be for Mr. Damon. So I don't know.
Where'd he go?
Well,
That's not his face.
I just looking for
What in your thought process, what's the correlation between the firehouse and the McMahon parking lot that should be done at the same time? What's your reasoning behind that?
Well, I think there's already a shortage of parking, so there's been a significant amount of staff parking on North Temple Street. And the area where the fire station is going to reduce that significantly. And of course, there's going to be other issues associated with allowing the fire equipment to be able to efficiently get in and out of there once it gets built. So if we wait until it's active, we're going to be in a bigger problem already because there just isn't any room for the staff to park now. There's been complaints. I know for a fact there's been complaints from the neighborhood about the parking. They block, somebody coming to see that something. There's no place during the school day to park, and the buses have difficulty at times manipulating around because there's so much parking on the street. It's not that wide of a street.
So last year's budget, we approved when they were repaving the Temple Street, which is on McMahon, that was the funding was put in there and they redid it so that they widened the street in front of McMahon School. I don't know if anybody has been by there since, but it's fantastic. And I, as a person who McMahon is in my backyard, I travel that road quite often. And since they've redone the road, there's no congestion. There's plenty of space on the side of the road to park for when there's school events or whatever. So I don't see right now that there's a hard time getting in and out and getting traffic through there, in my opinion.
Do you think a fire truck might have a hard time getting through?
No.
Could I
Ms. Ray?
add one thing?
Yeah.
So the city council then made it no parking in that area. So there should be no parking on the street.
Whoops.
You're welcome.
When did that happen? Because they specifically widened the street last year so that there is a parking aisle and then two lanes.
I believe there's like a certain stretch of road where it's like 3 lanes, the middle is a turning lane, and there's no parking for some period. Again, Councilor LaJoy has a lot more information on this, but the council did vote to approve that traffic schedule change. I can look back at minutes and try to give you more information, but it just seems like there's a lot of compounding issues here.
Ms. Avery?
Yes, so that is correct. There is no parking out in front of McMahon. However, we did ask if we could continue to park there and the signs were covered. So we have been allowed to continue to park there. My request would be to, until we can get, if this doesn't go forward, we would have to be able to continue to park there.
Interesting.
That's probably going to be problematic during the construction phase. That construction phase is 400 days, I think.
So I have another question. If the Sabattis Fire Station is going to be moving forward and the reconstruction of the parking lot at McMahon would move forward, I could see that being very frustrating for the community to try to get in and out of there if that's during the school year. So I know that when we did the road itself, it was chaos. So if there's 2 construction jobs, so I mean, that's not our place to, to make that happen or not happen, but thinking about the funding there going towards that parking lot, would that even make sense this year? I don't know. I just playing devil's advocate here.
So I think it might be good before we, when we have it on the agenda for a vote during discussion, if we had information from the public about, apparently some has been coming in. So any that we have had to city council, since we haven't been getting it directly, would be super helpful for the committee. It could even go in the packet if the public has agreed to have it shared. I think it would be important to hear those voices in part of our decision making. I myself like the way that this looks. I think that we've found alternative ways to help pay for some things. I can understand the deferring the parking lot, but on a practicality standard, I need to know more about how the fire station construction works in with that and how it affects the people in that neighborhood. But for our part as school committee members, our staff and our students and their safety. For me, all 3 of these are safety issues. And, I'm not super comfortable with putting those down the road. Like almost all of these that come before us can be some safety issue, broken steps in the high school, like the tread is worn off on the stairs and things like that, that we can put paint over to make it a little bit better. These are huge safety concerns. And I said this before about the Dingley security project. For even us, when we leave at nighttime, it is a scary place to be. There's no lighting, there's no security. When people can just walk off the street any time of day into the building. So again, to me, these are high safety concerns, and that would be my input toward this. I'd be supportive of the way that it's the recommendation, and I'm not sure about deferring the McMahon parking lot expansion just yet. I think I need a little bit more info to get it going. Ms. Ray?
So I just want to say, my brain is stretched so thin right now. So if any details I got wrong, I do apologize. And also 800 people are texting me trying to correct me. So I'm trying to feel everyone.
No.
So what I can do to be helpful is I can reach out to Councilor LaJoy and ask that he forward a summary of what the citizens' complaints were. I know the city administrator is watching because he's texting a lot. And so I'm just going to ignore you all on my phone. Okay. So hopefully the city can provide what is going on, what the distances are, if an engineering study has already been done as part of the fire station, because that's entirely possible. So that's how I can be helpful. I'm sorry if I confused everyone.
I think that these discussions are important for us because then we know what we're looking for answers, so the data can be provided to us so we can make a sound decision. Okay, so that was the last item on our agenda. I'll just do one more. Oh, Miss Avery says, no, it's not. Okay, what?
We have the 3rd component of the memo.
Oh, where is it?
And that's authorization to transfer.
Sorry.
So I'd like to go over that real quick because at the next board meeting, you'll be wanting to take a vote on this. So What this is, I'm recommending that the board consider authorizing a transfer of $255,000 from various capital projects to fund the Dingley Building Security Project. This funding comes from the following sources. There's an FY17 net bond premium accumulated interest less issuance costs of $158,000. FY18, we did a an AC project at Montello, and there's a balance remaining on that project of $27,000 that we'd like to use towards this. And then FY19, there's bond premium and interest of $70,000. So in your packet, you have the resolve there that we'll utilize at the next board meeting that authorizes us to be able to transfer this funding. You'll either approve that or you won't. If you do approve it, then it goes before the city council, and then the city council will either approve or not. And hopefully they do approve it. And then that's how the Dingley Security Project would be funded.
So it's not just a vote on that we want to fund it. We have to actually vote to transfer those funds to support the vote to have that project done.
That's right.
And then city council can say what they want on it.
Exactly. Yes.
All right.
Perfect.
Okay. Anybody have questions about that? No. Okay. I will entertain a motion. To adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
It's just a workshop. Do we need a
Yeah,
motion?
Oh, it's on the agenda. I'm following the agenda. Okay, fine. We're done.
Thanks, Chair Roy.
Have a good night, you guys.
Thanks, everyone.